My husband quit his job without telling me and expected me to support him. It started with something so small that I almost ignored it. My husband came home on a Tuesday afternoon. Now, before I even continue, let me explain why that was strange. He normally worked until 6, sometimes later if his team had deadlines. So when I heard the front door open a little after 1, I honestly thought maybe he forgot something. Instead, he walked into the kitchen carrying a takeout bag, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. He kissed me on the forehead and said, "Babe, guess what? I'm finally free." I laughed because I thought he was joking. Free from what? My job. I stopped chopping vegetables. Vacation. No, I quit. Just like that, no warning, no conversation, no discussion. He had quit his job. I remember staring at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. He sat down, opened his food, and started eating while I stood there wondering if I'd heard him correctly. I finally asked, "You mean, you gave your notice?" "Nope. You already left." "Yep. When were you planning on telling me?" He shrugged. "I just did." That was the first moment I realized we weren't having the same marriage, because in my mind, major life decisions were something both people discussed. Apparently, in his mind, they were surprise announcements over fried chicken. I tried to stay calm. "Why would you quit without saying anything?" He leaned back like this was the easiest question in the world. I hated it. "'Kay, fair enough, lots of people hate their jobs, I understood that. But hating your job doesn't magically erase rent or groceries or insurance or electricity, or literally every other bill adults have. So, what's the plan? I'll figure something out." When he waved his hand. Soon. That answer should have terrified me. Instead, I convinced myself he was just stressed. Maybe he'd already lined something up. Maybe he needed a week off. Maybe there was information I didn't know yet. I wanted to believe that, because believing the alternative meant accepting that my husband had made one of the biggest financial decisions of our marriage without even asking how I felt. That night, I opened our budget spreadsheet. We had savings, not amazing savings, not terrible savings, enough to survive for maybe 3 months if we were careful. I asked him if he wanted to update his resume. "Do it tomorrow." Tomorrow came, he slept until noon, played video games, watched YouTube, ordered food. The resume stayed exactly where it had been, untouched. The next day, same thing, then another, then another. After 2 weeks, I gently asked, "So, have you applied anywhere?" He looked annoyed. "You really don't know how to let someone decompress." "Been decompressing at work every day while paying the bills." "You make it sound like I'm doing nothing." Looked around. The dishes weren't washed. Laundry was piled up. The trash was overflowing. The vacuum hadn't moved in days. "What exactly are you doing?" He crossed his arms. "I'm taking care of my mental health. Now, before anyone misunderstands me. Mental health absolutely matters. Burnout is real. Needing a break is real. If he'd come to me beforehand and said, 'I'm struggling. Can we make a plan together?' I would have supported him. I would have helped him. I would have probably encouraged him to take some time. But that's not what happened. He made the decision alone, then expected me to quietly absorb every consequence. A month passed. My paycheck became our paycheck. Every bill came out of my account: mortgage, internet, insurance, gas, food, everything. He'd occasionally say, "Thanks, babe." Like he was thanking me for passing the salt. Meanwhile, I was calculating whether we could afford fresh fruit that week. I started working overtime. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. I left home before sunrise. Sometimes I got home after dark. One evening, I walked through the front door completely exhausted. The sink was overflowing. Pizza boxes covered the coffee table. Empty soda cans were everywhere. My husband was sitting on the couch wearing headphones, playing games. He looked at me and smiled. I waited. Nothing else. "No, how was work?" "No, I made dinner." "No, I cleaned today." Nothing. I quietly picked up the trash. He didn't even pause the game. I finally asked, "Could you help me?" He sighed dramatically. "Been relaxing." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Been working 12-hour shifts. And I need help." "You make more money anyway." That sentence hit harder than I expected. "You make more money anyway." Like earning more somehow automatically meant doing everything else too. I looked at him. "So because my salary is higher, I should work, pay every bill, clean the house, cook dinner, and you're just here. You're independent." I blinked. "What? Isn't that what modern women want?" I actually thought he was joking. He wasn't. He continued. "Always said you're independent." I said I'm capable. Same thing. It's basically the same. No, it absolutely wasn't. Being capable doesn't mean wanting to carry another adult forever. Being independent doesn't mean volunteering to become someone else's financial safety net. That conversation stayed in my head for days, because suddenly little memories started connecting whenever we went out. Usually grab the check, he'd say, I'll get the next one. Next one rarely came. Whenever rent increased, I'd cover the difference. Whenever something broke, I'd pay for repairs. At first I thought we were just helping each other. Now I started wondering, had I slowly become the default provider without realizing it? About 6 weeks after he quit, I asked him something simple. Many applications have you sent? He looked uncomfortable. Been researching. How many? How many? None. None, not one, not even casually browsing, nothing. I stared at him. What have you been doing all day? I'm figuring out what I want. While I'm figuring out how to pay for everything. You don't have to be sarcastic. I laughed again. It was becoming a habit, not because things were funny, because if I didn't laugh, I honestly thought I might cry. That weekend, my parents invited us over for dinner. Halfway through the meal, my mom asked, so how's work? Before I could answer, my husband proudly announced, I left my job. My parents looked surprised. Oh, did you find another one? He smiled. Yet, my dad looked at me just for a second, one look parents always know. Later, while helping my mom wash dishes, she quietly asked, are you okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, she didn't buy it. Carrying something. I wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I said, we're just adjusting. She nodded slowly. Then she said something I didn't appreciate until much later. Marriage is teamwork. If only one person is rowing, eventually the boat starts going in circles. That sentence stayed with me, because our boat wasn't moving anymore. I was rowing, he was enjoying the scenery. And somehow I was the one apologizing every time I got tired. Then came the grocery trip that completely changed how I saw our relationship. We filled the cart with basics, nothing fancy. Eggs, rice, vegetables, chicken, coffee. The total popped up on the screen. I reached for my wallet, out of habit. The cashier smiled. My husband just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at candy near the register, not even pretending to look for his wallet, not even offering, like paying had quietly become my responsibility again, automatically. And for the first time, I didn't take my card out immediately. I just stood there, waiting. So did the cashier, so did the people behind us. My husband finally looked over. What? I said softly, are you paying? He actually laughed. With what money? The cashier suddenly became very interested in scanning gum. I could feel everyone's awkward silence. I paid, of course I paid. But something inside me shifted that day. Because it wasn't about the groceries. It was about the expectation. He genuinely believed my money was our money, while his responsibility had somehow disappeared the moment he quit. And that realization was only the beginning. He didn't notice the change in me after that. Or maybe he noticed and assumed I'd get over it like always. For the next week, I stopped reminding him about job applications. I stopped asking about interviews. I stopped bringing up our budget. I wanted to see what would happen if I wasn't the one managing everything. The answer, nothing. Absolutely nothing. The electricity bill sat unopened on the counter for 3 days. The laundry basket overflowed. We ran out of dish soap. The refrigerator was nearly empty because I hadn't had time to shop after working late. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, frowned, and called out, Babe, we're out of milk. I was sitting at the dining table answering work emails. Without looking up, I said, okay. A few seconds passed, then he asked, so, are you going to get some? I finally looked at him. I got home 20 minutes ago. So maybe you could go. He looked genuinely confused. I don't really feel like driving. I blinked. Been at work since 7 this morning. I know, but you're already out. I am home. You know what I mean. No, I honestly didn't know what he meant anymore. It was like somewhere along the way, he'd quietly decided that every inconvenience belonged to me. If something needed, do it. If something needed paying, I'd handle it. If something needed cleaning, I'd figure it out. His only contribution seemed to be pointing out what still needed to be done. A few days later, I came home earlier than usual because a meeting had been canceled. As I walked in, I heard him laughing, not just laughing, talking excitedly. He didn't hear me, so I paused in the hallway. He was on voice chat with his friends. One of them asked, so, have you found another job yet? He laughed. Another friend joked, living the dream. Then my husband said something that made my stomach drop. Honestly, why rush? My wife makes enough for both of us. Group laughed, someone whistled, another friend said, man, you've got it made. And my husband replied, I know, she's got everything under control. I stood frozen. It wasn't the joke itself, it was how proud he sounded. Like this arrangement wasn't temporary, like he'd somehow unlocked a life hack, like my stress was his vacation. I quietly walked back outside, sat in my car, and stared through the windshield for almost 15 minutes. I kept replaying those words. She's got everything under control. Did I? Because from where I was sitting, I felt like I was barely holding everything together. That evening, I didn't mention what I'd overheard. I wanted to see if he'd bring it up. He didn't. Instead, he asked what was for dinner. I almost laughed, almost. The next Friday was payday. Normally, my paycheck would land in the morning, and by evening I'd already transferred money toward our bills. This time I paid the essentials, mortgage, utilities, insurance. Then I moved the rest into a separate savings account that only I could access, not because I wanted to hide money, because I realized I needed to know exactly what we actually had left. When my husband checked our joint account that afternoon, he called me. Babe. Yeah. Why isn't there as much money in here? I paid the bills. Where's the rest? I moved it into savings. There was a pause. Can you move it back? Why? I wanted to order a new gaming monitor. I thought I'd misheard him. A gaming monitor? Mine's getting old. I took a slow breath. We've been living on one income for almost 2 months. I know, we're cutting back on groceries. I know, I'm working overtime every week. I know, you're asking me to buy you a gaming monitor. He sounded irritated. It was just a question. What? The answer is no. He sighed loudly into the phone. Been really controlling lately. Controlling, that word stayed with me all day. Apparently saying no to an unnecessary purchase while paying every bill made me controlling. Interesting, that weekend, his younger sister stopped by unexpectedly. She'd always been sweet to me, so I was happy to see her. While my husband was upstairs grabbing something, she looked around the house and smiled. So, how's retirement treating him? I frowned. What? She looked confused. He told everyone he was taking an early retirement break. I nearly laughed. She tilted her head. Wait, isn't that what this is? I slowly shook my head. No, oh, her face immediately changed. I didn't realize. She looked genuinely embarrassed. I thought you two planned this together. Made it sound like you both agreed. That hurt more than I expected, because not only had he quit without telling me, he'd apparently been telling everyone this was a mutual decision. Like I had happily volunteered to carry our entire household, his sister looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed. It's okay. But it wasn't okay, not even close. Later that night, after she'd left, I finally asked him, "Why are you telling people we planned this together?" He shrugged. It sounds better. Better for who? For us. I looked him straight in the eyes. It sounds better for you. He rolled his eyes. Why are you making everything into a fight? I'm asking a question. You always need someone to blame. I actually laughed. Need someone to blame? Yeah, I'm paying every bill. So, I work overtime almost every day. So, you haven't applied for a single job. He crossed his arms. I told you I'm figuring things out. You've been figuring things out for 2 months. You don't understand burnout. I understand responsibilities. His expression hardened. Changed. I nodded. Right. The first time in weeks. I agreed with him because I had changed. I was no longer convincing myself this was just a rough patch. I was starting to see a pattern. Every time I raised a reasonable concern, I somehow became the problem. Every conversation ended with me apologizing. Every disagreement became proof that I was unsupportive. Every boundary became controlling. And somehow, despite doing almost everything, I was still expected to feel guilty. That realization was uncomfortable, but it was also freeing. Because once you finally see a pattern, it's impossible to unsee it. And I had a feeling the next conversation we were about to have was going to change everything. I didn't start that conversation immediately, not because I was afraid, because I wanted to be absolutely sure I wasn't reacting out of frustration. So I gave it one more week. 1 week, 7 whole days. I told myself if he shows even a little initiative, maybe there's still something to work with. I didn't nag. I didn't remind him. I didn't ask about resumes. I simply watched. Monday. He slept until nearly 11. Tuesday. He spent the afternoon watching videos about people who had become successful entrepreneurs. Wednesday. He excitedly told me he had an amazing business idea. What is it? Thinking about starting a clothing brand. Oh, everyone's doing it. Have you researched manufacturing? Not yet. Suppliers? No. Figured we'd use some savings. I almost choked on my coffee. Savings? Yeah. Savings I'm trying to protect because we're living on one income. He smiled like I was missing the bigger picture. You have to spend money to make money. I stared at him for a few seconds, then I asked the only question that mattered. Much were you planning to spend? I don't know. Maybe 5,000 to start. 5,000, not enough to build a real business, just enough to disappear from our emergency fund. I calmly said, no. His smile disappeared. You don't even believe in me. I believe in planning. Never support my dreams. I supported you for 2 months. He scoffed. That's different. It's exactly the same. He walked away before I could finish. Apparently, reality had become inconvenient. A few days later, my company announced that we'd be getting annual performance bonuses, nothing life-changing. But enough that I was relieved. I mentioned it casually over dinner. I should get my bonus next Friday. His eyes lit up immediately. Seriously? Yeah, perfect. Perfect, I frowned. Perfect for what? Been looking at vacation packages. I honestly thought he was joking again. Vacation? Yeah, we both deserve one. Set my fork down. We can't afford a vacation. Can with your bonus. My bonus. Bonus. There it was again, that little word. Funny how everything connected to my paycheck suddenly belonged to both of us, yet somehow unemployment belonged only to him. I took a deep breath. I was planning to put that money into savings. He looked disappointed. No fun anymore. No fun. Because I wanted financial security instead of beach photos. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the version of us from 3 years ago. Back then, we'd celebrate little victories together. If one of us was overwhelmed, the other stepped in. When he worked late, I'd handle dinner. When I had deadlines, he'd clean the apartment. It wasn't perfect, but it felt balanced. Somewhere along the way, that balance disappeared. And I honestly couldn't remember when. The following weekend, we were invited to a barbecue hosted by one of his college friends. I debated not going, but I figured maybe getting out of the house would help. For the first hour, everything was normal. People chatted. Kids ran around the yard. Someone was grilling burgers. Then the conversation shifted toward work. One friend had just gotten promoted. Another had switched careers. Someone asked my husband, "So what have you been up to these days?" Before he could answer, another guy laughed and said, "Oh, he's living the luxury life. His wife pays for everything." Everyone chuckled. I waited for my husband to correct him instead. He grinned. Can't argue with that. More laughter. Someone jokingly said, "Teach us your secrets." My husband raised his drink. Find a successful woman. Everyone laughed again. I forced a smile, but inside, something cracked because jokes are funny when everyone involved is laughing. I wasn't. I felt embarrassed, reduced to a punchline, not because I earned more, but because my effort had become entertainment. One of the wives quietly walked over while everyone else was distracted. She lowered her voice. "Are you okay?" I looked at her. "What makes you ask?" She hesitated. "My husband jokes sometimes too." "But yours," she searched for the right words. "It doesn't sound like he's joking." That sentence stayed with me the entire drive home. The car was silent. Finally, he asked, "Why are you so quiet?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Did you enjoy today?" "Yeah, I didn't." He sighed dramatically. Upset about the jokes. They weren't jokes to me. They were harmless. Everyone laughed. I didn't. He leaned back in his seat. "You care too much about what people think." I shook my head. "No. I care about being respected." He didn't respond. When we got home, I walked straight to the bedroom, for the first time since we'd gotten married. I locked the door not because I was afraid, because I needed space, real space. The next morning, I woke up early, made myself coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I opened our bank statements, every payment from the last 2 months' rent, electricity, water, internet, insurance, groceries, fuel, streaming subscriptions, phone bills. Everything. Then I highlighted one simple detail. Who paid, page after page. Every single payment came from my income. Meanwhile, his personal spending hadn't exactly stopped. Coffee runs, online game purchases, food delivery, small expenses that added up much faster than he seemed to realize. By the time I finished the spreadsheet, I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, and somehow, being calm felt far more powerful, because anger fades, facts don't. When he finally wandered into the kitchen around 10, he stretched, yawned, and smiled. "Morning." I smiled politely. "Morning." He poured himself coffee, then noticed the papers spread across the table. "What's all this?" "Our finances." He glanced at them for maybe 3 seconds before shrugging. "You worry too much." I slowly turned the laptop toward him. "Want you to look?" "Good." I kept my voice steady. "Need you to actually look." The first time in weeks, his smile disappeared. And I could tell he finally realized this wasn't another casual conversation, this time. I had numbers, dates, receipts, and no intention of pretending everything was fine anymore. He stared at the spreadsheet for a few seconds, then he pushed the laptop back toward me without reading it. "I don't need a presentation." "It's not a presentation." "Feels like one. It's our reality." He sighed so dramatically that, a few months earlier, I probably would have apologized just to end the conversation. This time I didn't. I simply folded my hands and waited. Silence has a funny way of making people uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. "So, what exactly do you want?" That question caught me off guard, not because I didn't have an answer, because he genuinely sounded like he had no idea why we were even sitting there. Want a partner? I am your partner. I shook my head. Living in the house. His eyebrows shot up. That's harsh. It's honest. Just been going through a rough time. I know. You don't understand how miserable that job made me. I believe you. I was exhausted. I believe that too. He looked relieved for a second, thinking I was about to let it go. Instead, I continued. But being miserable at work doesn't give you permission to hand your responsibilities to someone else. His expression changed immediately. You always make everything sound so simple. Don't think it's simple. I needed support. You had support. What? I supported you the day you quit. I started counting on my fingers. I paid every bill. Never complained about groceries. I worked overtime. Never asked you to pay me back. I gave you time. I defended you when people asked questions. I looked him straight in the eyes. What I didn't agree to was supporting you forever. He opened his mouth, closed it, then changed the subject completely. So what, you're keeping score now? There it was. The conversation had officially entered familiar territory whenever he couldn't argue with facts. He criticized the fact that I remembered them. I'm not keeping score. Sounds like it. I'm keeping track. Same thing. I leaned forward. If we're carrying a couch together and I suddenly let go without telling you, you'd notice. If I watched you struggle while I stood there, you'd be upset. If I told you that noticing was keeping score, you'd think I was ridiculous. He didn't answer because he knew exactly what I meant. A few minutes passed before he quietly asked, "So what happens now?" I had rehearsed this conversation in my head 100 times, but saying the words out loud still made my heart race. "Starting next month, I'm only paying my share." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we'll split household expenses based on what we can reasonably contribute. I don't have income." "I know. So how am I supposed to pay?" "You'll need to figure that out." He laughed, not a happy laugh. Kind people make when they think someone is bluffing. Serious? Yes, you'd really do that to your own husband. I looked at him quietly. No, I'm refusing to keep doing this to myself. His face hardened. So this is an ultimatum. It's a boundary. He stood up so quickly his chair scraped across the floor. I can't believe you're acting like this. I can't believe you expected this to last forever. He started packing around the kitchen. Sacrifice things too. What? I left a toxic job. I know. More do you want? A plan. I told you I'm working on one. You've been saying that for over 2 months. He ran both hands through his hair. You have no idea how much pressure you're putting on me. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because that sentence perfectly described my life for the last 9 weeks. Know exactly what pressure feels like. He stared at me, neither of us said anything for almost a minute, then he grabbed his keys. I need some air. The front door slammed behind him. I sat alone in the kitchen. The house felt strangely quiet, not peaceful, just different. For the first time in months, I hadn't backed down, and despite how difficult that conversation had been, I didn't regret a single word. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend Emma. She hadn't talked to me all week because she'd been traveling for work. Her text simply said, "Coffee tomorrow, I miss you." Almost said no out of habit. I was tired, emotionally drained. But then I realized something. For weeks, my entire world had revolved around keeping my husband comfortable. I hadn't made time for anyone else, so I replied, "Yes." The next afternoon, we met at our favorite little cafe. The moment she saw me, she frowned. "You look exhausted." "I am." She waited. She'd always been good at waiting, not forcing conversations, just giving people room to speak. Eventually, everything came pouring out, from the day he quit, to the unpaid bills, to the jokes at the barbecue, to the gaming monitor, to the spreadsheet. She listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she stirred her coffee for a moment before asking one simple question. "If your little sister came to you with this exact story, what advice would you give her?" I didn't even have to think. I'd tell her this isn't sustainable. Emma nodded. "So why is different advice okay for you?" I stared down at my coffee, because she was right. If someone I loved described this relationship to me, I'd be worried. Yet somehow, because I was living it, I'd convinced myself that asking for basic partnership was asking for too much. Before we left, Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know what's been bothering me the most?" "What?" "You never once complained that he lost his job." I frowned. "You complained that he stopped showing up." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because it was true. This had never been about unemployment. It was about effort, respect, honesty, teamwork. Any couple can survive hard times when both people are trying. But when only one person keeps trying, eventually they run out of strength. As I drove home that evening, I had a strange feeling, like I was standing at a crossroads. One road led back to pretending everything was normal. The other required difficult choices. I didn't know which road my husband was going to choose, but for the first time, I knew which one I couldn't keep walking alone. When I got home, his car was already in the driveway. That surprised me. Normally, after an argument, he'd stay out for hours. I walked inside. The house was unusually quiet. No TV, no game console, no music, for a second. I actually thought maybe he'd gone to bed early. Then I saw him sitting at the dining table, the same table where I'd spread out our finances the day before. He looked different, not dramatically, just quieter. There was a notebook in front of him. As I walked closer, I noticed something written across the top of the page, jobs to apply for one brief moment. My heart lifted. Maybe this had finally reached him. Maybe all those conversations hadn't been for nothing. He looked up. Been thinking. I sat down across from him. Okay, I know you're upset. I am. I get why. I nodded slowly. He continued. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part remembered that I'd been saying the same thing for weeks, so instead of celebrating too early, I simply asked, "What are you going to do about it?" He pushed the notebook toward me. I made a list. I looked down. There were 8 companies written on the page. It wasn't much, but it was more effort than I'd seen in over 2 months. When are you applying? Tomorrow morning. I smiled politely. I hope you do. He frowned. You don't believe me. It's not that. Then what? I've heard tomorrow a lot lately. He looked down at the notebook. I deserve that. It was the first time in weeks he'd taken responsibility without immediately defending himself still. I wasn't ready to let my guard down. Promises had become very cheap. I needed actions. The next morning, I deliberately went to work without reminding him. No text, no phone call, no checklist. If he was serious, he didn't need a manager. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed, a message from him. Applied to 3 places. No emojis, no dramatic speech. Just one sentence. I wanted to feel relieved. Instead, I found myself thinking. 3 applications should have happened 2 months ago. That realization surprised me, because I understood something important. And trust has been worn down little by little. One good day doesn't magically rebuild it. That evening he showed me confirmation emails. He had actually applied. I smiled. Good. He waited, almost like he expected applause. When it didn't come, he asked, "That's it." "What do you mean?" "I thought you'd be happier." "I am. This is the minimum." His shoulders dropped. "I know, over the next week." He applied to more jobs. He started waking up earlier. He even cleaned the kitchen twice without being asked. It was nice, genuinely, but I also noticed something else. Every helpful thing he did came with an expectation. After washing dishes, he'd ask, "So, are we okay now?" After sending another application, "We're good again, right?" After making dinner one night, "You see, I'm trying." He wanted forgiveness immediately. I wanted consistency. Those aren't the same thing. About 10 days later, he finally got an interview. He came running into the living room holding his phone. "I got one." I smiled, really smiled this time. "That's great." He hugged me. For the first time in months, it felt natural. I wanted him to succeed despite everything. I truly did. The interview was on a Thursday. I wished him luck before work. All day I found myself checking my phone. Around 4 in the afternoon, he called. "I think it went well." I could hear excitement in his voice. "Proud of you." "Thanks." The first time in a long time. That conversation felt like 2 teammates talking. Not a parent and a child. 3 days later, they offered him the position. The salary wasn't as high as his old job, but it was stable, full-time with benefits. He accepted immediately. That evening, he came home carrying takeout from my favorite restaurant. I wanted to celebrate. Over dinner, he looked at me and quietly said, "I owe you an apology." I didn't interrupt. I kept telling myself I just needed time. He looked down at his plate. But if I'm honest, I got comfortable. Room went completely silent because that was the first completely honest sentence I'd heard in months. He continued. I kept thinking one more week wouldn't matter. Then another week. Another. I convinced myself everything was fine because you kept handling it. I swallowed hard. "I shouldn't have." "No, you shouldn't have." He nodded. "I know." Then he looked directly at me. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight." "I wouldn't." "I know. I earned that." Again, no excuses. No blaming stress, no accusing me of being controlling, just accountability. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar. Over the next few weeks, he actually followed through. His first paycheck came in without me asking. He transferred money toward the household bills, then he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "I've been keeping track." Inside was cash. "What?" "Everything you covered while I wasn't working." I looked at him. You don't have to repay every rupee. I know. I want to. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, then I pushed it back toward him. Keep it. He looked confused. I'd rather see consistency than reimbursement. He smiled faintly. Fair enough. Months later, things weren't magically perfect. Trust didn't return all at once. Some days I'd still feel anxious whenever he mentioned work. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if he was hiding something. Healing wasn't instant. But every morning he got up for work. Every month he paid his share. Every difficult conversation became a little easier because he stopped treating me like the enemy. Looking back now, I don't think the hardest part was supporting us financially. Money comes and goes. The hardest part was feeling alone while standing beside someone who was supposed to be my teammate. Marriage isn't tested when everything is easy. It's tested when life gets messy. Losing a job isn't a failure. Needing help isn't a failure. But expecting someone to quietly carry every responsibility without honesty, appreciation, or effort, that's where relationships begin to crack. Thankfully, in our case, the story didn't end with one person winning and the other losing. It ended the moment we both understood something simple. Love can carry a relationship through hard times, but only accountability keeps it standing.